Good. Let the song play out first. Now, I really felt like making this real quick because a lot of shit going on overall, like energetically and shit. Honestly, I feel like it takes a certain perspective to understand a lot of this shit. So, first things first, I wanted to say basically that a lot of shit in the universe ain't really what it seems. That's number one. Like, a lot of shit is pretty different from what you might expect, honestly. A lot of shit ain't the same kind of process you see out here in a lot of fucking tabloids and shit everywhere on the internet and shit. No, that's not how the universe and shit is. Mind you, everybody here is having a quote-unquote human experience, so you gotta keep in mind that only certain beings can process shit like that in the first place. Like, even if you were able to process an idea or a thought process that the universe had created originally or some shit, the universe, mind you, it's gonna take you a minute to actually get to understand that shit. Everything takes time here and shit, you know, fucking shit being slower because it's Taurus or whatever, you know, the Greeks want to call it and shit, and other shit, but that's not important. The important part is that basically everything is disguised, like, in a way. Like, everything has some kind of like shielding or cloak to it. It's not the same kind of process you would think it would be, besides, like, how I put it, besides being militant in some kind of shape, way, or form. Well, you have to think about it. The universe has to exist in some kind of environment regardless of how big or small you think you are. So if you're already inside of a being, or you are that being, it depends on the environment regardless, kind of. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, you don't want to always walk into a room full of vultures and then, you know what I'm saying, be the one to decide to be a fucking carcass that day. That doesn't make any sense. So it's a simple thing. It's nothing complicated. It's about survival, kind of, but more so like understanding the humanity's innate desire to recreate, or more so like conceive, you know? So basically the whole entire process of like lineages and lifetimes and shit is basically something that the universe had to go through as well. So that's kind of how I'm breaking it down like this. It's like, you gotta understand that you and the universe are damn near the same, but also completely different. Like, you are a universe in your own right, but it doesn't make you bigger or smaller than what you want to call the universe or God or whatever the fuck. It doesn't matter. The point is that at the end of the day, it's just like us, because at the end of the day, we just nothing but a disguise. Is nothing but, like, everything that you see around you is nothing but a cloak. Like, you know what I'm saying? It's an illusion. So it's not really there per se, but it's also something that you can tangibly, quote unquote, tangibly see and feel and touch or whatever, because everybody else has a similar kind of thought process towards it. So it's like everybody can collectively agree on some things, and this is where you get shit like different dimensions and everything else, kind of, or having different dimensions of a thought process. Like, you can have different ideas and shit about the same kind of, you know, project or concept or whatever you want to call it. But the reason why I'm breaking this down and why I said what I said earlier is because a lot of this shit isn't the same. A lot of this shit is different. Not everything has the same kind of particles and shit to it, and everything has the same kind of anatomy and structure to it. Everything is different, has a different composition. So that also includes like entities you would never know about and shit. Like everything has a different composition, so you really would never really know anything. So this is debunking the thought process of even thinking you know shit too. I'm not sure if I tell this, it might be some shit like everything in medicine, but which is true, but kind of more so like getting to the point of not just that, but how to not let that disrupt your day-to-day life, really. So what I just said, if it's not real, it means there's no point in taking this shit serious. If it's not really what you think it is, then there's no point in really taking these thought processes seriously. This is kind of another way to like also manage your own mind and thoughts and shit, and manage how you can create and really destroy shit, like how you construct and destroy shit in your own mind. Because everybody does this, but it's just that nobody realizes they do it because everybody cleans on a certain thought processes. So it's like you constantly create the same circumstance with the same thought pattern. So you basically have the same environment or the same, the same people or the same places and things around you, because it's basically creating the same kind of process. It's creating the same kind of thought process and over and over and over. It doesn't have to necessarily be that. Like, doesn't be the reason why you're experiencing the same shit. Like, having that thought process and shit is one part of it. But it's more so just showing that, like, the shit you think about isn't necessarily everything necessarily. Like, you know what I'm saying? It's not like you have an entire process of thoughts that determine an entire person being alive or dead or some shit. Like, or that determines like how good or bad your day goes. It's more so just like this is how you receive certain things. This is what you're receiving. So it's like you're the person that's really like you yourself, who you really truly are, is not the person that's thinking. It's not the person. It's not what's thinking. Your mind is always thinking, so it's always gonna be active. It's like the same thing as your heart beating. It's pretty much the same concept. How come you're always expanding and contracting? That's like your soul or your spirit basically doing that. So everything has its own process, its own innate way of doing things, and it also has like an organ kind of vibe to it, I guess you could say. But more so, it has its own living circumstance, basically is what I'm saying. Like, how come you think we have certain fruits and vegetables that help certain processes in your body as well? Like, this is how come life is like this. It's like there's a huge connection here, but it's just everybody seems to be kind of lost in the sauce a little bit. It's like, bro, none of this shit is really that real, nor that serious. That's how come we don't have contact with other life forms and shit. Like, I kind of want to, like, explain why, but that's going to take a whole nother, like, thing or whatever. So I might just try to condense it a little bit and explain on it further, maybe, a little bit later. But more so, it's just, like, whenever you have certain thought patterns and shit, whenever your mind creates these thoughts and shit, it's not creating certain thoughts just based off of, like the actuality of things. It creates based off your perspective. So if it's creating off of that, then you only have your own perspective, so you can understand it in one certain kind of way. But that's where it becomes more biased and shit, and that's where it becomes more lost, I guess you could say. But it's more like it's really more like if you were to take it in a certain kind of way, not if you were to make it a certain kind of way. It's one letter difference, but this is the shit that they try to confuse you with when it comes to English language and shit. There's certain things that have little to no difference in words or tones or whatever, but it actually has basically the same meaning behind it, or the same kind of vibration, the same kind of concept behind it. Basically a tactic used to confuse you and shit. But to help clarify shit, it's your boy Christ Safana. Hoping that everybody can get to this clarity in some shape, way, or form. Don't get lost in this shit, please. Cause it's not that real. The real shit is already like happening. It's already happened. The real shit has already happened. So at this point, this is how come the universe and shit, and you can even have the concept of a timeline, because certain things have already happened in a certain timeline, in a certain way, in a certain form. But it's like, as of right now, we're experiencing shit in a different form. So it's a different way, different timeline. The same way you can think about shit in different timelines. You don't always remember everything. So certain shit could have been 30 minutes ago, but it felt, or you thought it was shorter or longer. It doesn't matter. The point is that at the end of the day, the thought process you create is only relative to you and your own perspective and spirit. So it's not like you're really receiving everything from every angle. You can. That's more so Pisces come in and shit, and kind of Scorpios a little bit. But really, you won't get everything, especially in a fucking simple, you know what I'm saying, clear way. It's gonna come in a whole bunch of, it's gonna come into the way that it can come to you. It's not gonna come to you in a way that's always probably the way you might want it or might think you see it. You know what I'm saying? So for example, let's say I'm thinking about, like, I don't know, cheese doodles or some shit. I might get cheese doodles, but in a way that I never would have expected. Like, for example, let's say I have like mad friends. Probably thought they would have gave it to me, but it wound out to be that I basically got it for free for helping somebody out. Like, you know what I'm saying? Open the door, they just bought it from me. You know what I'm saying? It's shit like that. Like, you can think about it, and then now it manifests in a way. It realizes itself, you know what I'm saying? Actualizes itself in some kind of way. But it's not like you solely thinking that was what brought that to you. It was more so like the vibe and everything that you was going through and everything that was happening around you is more so a collective thing. It's like everybody kind of has a, like, I wouldn't say a say so, but everybody kind of has their own way and perspective of how shit can happen. So for you, it has to be different. Like, it has to be a different way to get to you because you're not the same as everybody else. So technically, it has to be in a newer or different way solely. You know what I'm saying? It can be like, for example, you never eat the same thing every day, the same way every time. Now think about that. Why is that? You don't have the same kind of thoughts every day. You don't have the same kind of feelings every day. Shit changes every day. But think about that. Why does shit change every day? How does it change every day? And then you could also be the person that doesn't change either. Like, you can have the same thought process if you try hard enough, if you're stubborn enough, if you really want to have the same thought process. But where does that get anybody? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, the whole point of a being in a body, really, honestly, is to adapt. Like, that's how come there's shit like survival, whatever. Because how could you last in that body if you weren't able to adapt, basically? Because the environment's gonna change always. Like, for example, the seasons don't all excuse me, the seasons always stay the same, and everything else can basically be something completely different the next day. Like, you can have one thought one day or one person next to you one day and they're completely different the next. We look different every day. Like, you know what I'm saying? It's not really hard to, I believe, get. I feel like this is something that's pretty straightforward, but you know what I'm saying? Just so that way I feel like it's clear to people, because it's not like people have the resources, honestly, and people don't have the, like, how do I put it? People don't have, like, the support, really. Like, there's, like, think about it. Think about how hard it is to understand certain things, like, already. Like, how come certain people won't even be open to certain shit? It's hard to get people to understand simple things because most people don't have the support to understand anything. Like, there's certain things in this reality, quote unquote, that basically aren't willing to give you anything. Like, and that's not even necessarily a bad thing, but it's more so there's also, you know what I'm saying, spirits, entities that won't want you to be supported. Like, people don't want everything for everybody. It's just simple. It's just simple. But most of the time, it's not the way that really, honestly, I don't want to say God per se, but it's not the way the Great Spirit knows it's supposed to be. Like, that's how I'll kind of like get into this right now with you. It's like, bro, there's not a lot of things that's solely, you know what I'm saying, that's solely completely in one fashion and form every time. Like, there's not a lot of consistency in a lot of this shit, basically. But that's where it comes from, is that stable-mindedness. Is that basically you can create a foundation based off of certain thought processes that play out the same way or similar ways every time, so that way you don't have to feel like you have to create a new way or a new thing to, you know, make it work. Like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. It's that kind of thing. So that's kind of my whole thing, is that, like, there's a lot of people trying to fix what ain't broke, and a lot of people a lot of people that's fucking broken that really ain't broken, and then they're trying to still fix that, like, or fix other shit. Like, you know what I'm saying? They're broke trying to fix other shit that's not broken, and they gotta really, quote unquote, fix themselves. But it's not like they're necessarily broken. Like, I'm not trying to make it seem like people don't have, like, mental health issues or whatever. It's more so just like, or people don't snap, I guess. But it's more so just like, how do I put it? you couldn't really come up with certain things if there wasn't a way for you to do it. But this is like me speaking like purely neutral, positive, negative, whatever, and not really neutral either. But this, for lack of a better word, everything's a bit contrived. Everything has its own set way that it wants things to happen. So then it works hard enough to build that. It's like how the man builds the house because it wants the house and the kids or whatever, or wants to live and thrive and have a legacy and create and procreate, and not even just man, but really like mankind. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, that's how come we're still a species and shit type shit. Like this, how come we have similar features and shit, because we have similar thought processes, we have similar DNA, we have similar understandings and shit. We're on the same planet. Like, you know what I'm saying? We're in the same space. So that's just basically what I'm kind of giving to you right now, is that we're in the same space, but there's so many spaces outside of this space that this one space is basically one being that we exist in and coexist with. Like, you know what I'm saying? We don't necessarily exist in it, but we can coexist with it. You know what I'm saying? So that's kind of where I feel like the confusion and shit kind of comes into play, and where things become super left field kind of, because it's like everybody kind of just got confused on like the processes of like coexisting basically. Like, you don't have to necessarily be somebody else, you don't have to hate somebody else, you love somebody else, but you don't have to necessarily harm nor hurt either party. Like, you know what I'm saying? It doesn't have to be a weird mix, you know what I'm saying, feelings kind of basis and everything else, because you know when shit get mixy, you get mixy. But it's more so just like you don't have to actually be in those kind of thought processes or experiences, considering that not everybody has the same kind of thought processes. And we can also know that everybody doesn't have the same thought processes, and everybody has the same feelings, same moral code or whatever. So that doesn't mean that it has to be necessarily disagreements, but you know what I'm saying, it's where we agree to disagree type shit. But really though, it's more so like, since everybody a different spirit, and space is basically infinite, there's a multiple ways everything can happen. So this is where both parties kind of come and make agreements and shit already, but it's more so just like, was the agreement like harmonious, or was it like harmful? Like, you know what I'm saying? It's like, was it like we agreed on some stupid shit, or we agreed on some like, you know, useful shit? Like, was he being productive or kind of productive really? Like, you know what I'm saying? But this is a we thing. It's like, take two to tango. Like, this is where these things come from, is that like most of the time you wouldn't ever get to that point. You would never really get there until both of you agreed upon something. Like, it had to be something you agreed upon, whether you were doing it subconsciously or unconsciously or consciously. Yes, it gets unconscious too. Because this is also how come you probably see a lot of weird people and figures and shit in your dreams, because you have a lot of unconscious activity going on, and there's a lot of things that you're trying to figure out, so you make a figure of it to figure out what it is. Like, this is how come you can use shit and interpret shit in the first place. This is how come you have things like intuition. That's how come you do things like breathe, really. Like, think about it. You wouldn't need to breathe if you was always in a dream. Like, you know what I'm saying? That wouldn't be a thing you would just do. You wouldn't even think about it. And sometimes it gets to that point. So, you know what I'm saying? What really is real? Like, that's kind of how come I'm like, there's nothing that's really real, and we're in a universe, but not really. It kind of seems like it's contradicting, but it's really not. It's just that everything has basically been contradicted before, and then now me explaining it makes it seem like it's, you know what I'm saying, something else, something completely different, but it's not. Different from how it might be seen and viewed now, but basically it's like they kind of got the point, but they really didn't fully understand it. Like, there's certain things that happen and reasons why there's, you know, shit that goes slower and shit. It's like we can concentrate on a topic for a long time, but that period of time that you spend on it, like, do you spend too much or too little time on it? You know what I'm saying? Depending on the person, it's everything depends on a certain point. But like, you know what I'm saying? It's more so like every point has to be kind of taken in a way too. Like, it's not like you can't or you couldn't acknowledge a certain point, but it's not like you have to necessarily acknowledge the point to the point that it becomes something that is like, you know what I'm saying? It's overbearing. Like you can't take acknowledging it anymore, and you gotta like change everything and certain shit. Like there's probably some circumstances where that's applicable, but again, everything is like not the same. So if certain shit applies, certain shit doesn't, or certain shit does, you know, vice versa. So overall, it's not like everything has to be the same, but due to everything having a similar lineage, basically, everything having a similar background, and everything having to kind of do not a funnel, like, what's the word? It's like kind of like has to like spread like vines. You know what I'm saying? It's basically so that way you have a way of basically a way of expanding, a way of understanding and knowing things, and a way of also having an inner, you know what I'm saying, overstanding, and you know what I'm saying, like an inner knowing and shit, like a complete, you know what I'm saying, overhaul of a thought process and shit. This is how you get your like information, basically, is because there always has to be a newer layer to things, because there's always things that have to, you know what I'm saying, like basically change. Everything has to change. So it's not like you can really avoid that process. It's how come the process in itself is a process. It's not every day, every fucking night thing, but it also is at the same time. It's not like you have to worry about it, like, oh, you're gonna, you know what I'm saying, have to change this right now, might as well. But it doesn't always, you know what I'm saying, mean to change everything at once, you know. And then honestly, when we to changing everything at once, that's basically like what niggas was trying to say is superpowers and shit, which is basically transforming a whole entire system, basically, of concepts and conceptualizations and shit, realizations and shit, into a newer form. So if you was to basically change an entire, like, it's like this, it's like how basically people like become a superstar in a way. This is how come also too, it's like it's not like being a star is fucking terrible, but there isn't any real entity or being that's solely one star. Like, it's gonna take an entire quote unquote constellation, but it's really but what you're trying to say is it's a body of stars, which is basically a constellation, or what they would try to say is a constellation. But you know, it's like, I'm not trying to sit there and argue with people. It doesn't matter to me. Believe what you want, but basically, this is, you know what I'm saying, my take on it, my understanding perspective on it. So I'm doing it from at most, you know what I'm saying, most as I can to make it clear, so that way it's not like a weird like conflation between this shit. Like, it don't really make two and two off. Like, basically, a real quick rundown of basically everything that I said is that first of all, the universe is not what it seems. Everything's disguised as this cloak. People aren't solely, and it's simple. It's basically common sense, but it's more so just like, so you understand that's common sense in a esoteric way. Like, it's esoteric common sense that, you know what I'm saying, like, doesn't ring a bell, then I don't know. Like, I wouldn't really want to put you into put you in the ring with Rocky right now. But really though, I'm saying, like, the whole entire process to that, from basically going from a being as a spirit, right, into a being in a form, right, is an entire transformation in itself, obviously. And also, obviously, it's not like everything is predetermined. So certain shit has to play out for it to have another destination. You know what I'm saying? It has to be a pathway that's created. This is how come you have shit like all roads lead to Rome and shit. Like, you know, it's not like Rome was necessarily the fucking center of the galaxy, but it was basically an entire hub, a central hub that was able to push out and create entire pathways and systems and structures that led it to itself. So this is how come, like, this is basically trying to help you, you know, if you take it, if you take it to, you know what I'm saying, not lose yourself, basically. It's like you're always you, basically. It's like, what are you doing, man? Like, snap out of it kind of thing. It's like, bro, like, think about that. It's like, you really snapped into what? You snapped into a certain thought process in a form. You snapped into a certain kind of perspective. You didn't really necessarily never have a broader view of things, but at one point you had probably concentrated on something for too long. I concentrated on something for too long as a spirit. And then that's how come shit has like certain densities and shit has certain vibrations and fluctuations and shit. It's not like everything has to be from one determined spot and location. Everything can spread out and also return to one determined set location, depending on what is actually set to do. Everything has a different path. So that would be taking probably eons to explain to everybody's individual path is, but it wouldn't be a process that can never happen. But that's what I'm saying. Like, we don't have this process of life where everything is just fucking black and white. Everything has a middle, and everything has different colors and hues to it. There's not always just one strict way of perceiving shit. So, you know, I know this video kind of ran long, but you know what I'm saying? Hopefully everybody, you know, kind of stuck with me a little bit. Fucking got the point. Really, everything is not what it seems. My phone about to die. Fuck. It's hard to really put this shit in 30 minutes, but I damn near did it. Fucking, it's a lot of information to digest, so you probably want to watch this shit more. Probably want to like kind of meditate on this shit, just so that way we can really like fully clearly get the picture. It's not like everybody has to, but if you're interested in this kind of stuff, then you won't waste your time. I'm pretty much gonna keep the last half section of this, if I can, like real quick, as like a quick like bullet list kind of thing, because I know I'm kind of getting a little bit besides the point, but it's basically how come life is like this. Like, life is not solely dependent on any set variable. There's too many variables in life for you to even really make a variable besides the variable itself just being there that's gonna make it so dependent on said variable. Like, every variable can change. The only thing that has to stay there, it's like a formula, basically. It's a formula to life. You know what I'm saying? You don't have to always have one version of something. You don't always have to have one sole way of something. You know, there's always different ways of doing it, and not every way is going to be the way that everybody has to do it. Not every way is going to be the way that everybody might see is the right way to do anything. But that's just the whole, like, the luxury of life in its way. You know what I'm saying? It's not like it's forcing you to do anything. It's there for it to be taken and received in the way that it is. And if you want to do anything more with, less with that, then that's up to you. But you know what I'm saying? At the end of the day, it actually simply is what it is. So it's not gonna much so like more so like for example, think about it. Like, you have no idea. Like, you can always have a vision and shit. Like, but you have no idea what 10 million years ago, right, really was like. You have no idea what that was like. It could have been like the way that it looked and everything, like the definitions and the contrasts and the subtle shadows and shit. like how everything had a certain kind of vibe to it was probably different. Like it probably was completely different. And the same thing goes for ahead in the future. You have no idea. That's everything that remains basically unknown. So until there's shit like this, like where you can basically write it down and shit, but even then it's hard to explain this with anything that we've created so far. It's hard to explain everything with anything we created. Everything doesn't have this one set process, so it's not like everything is going to be able to be created in one set process. You know what I'm saying? Everything takes a process, but the one process you might sit there and say that it is simply life, and that word has like infinite meanings to it in its own right. You know what I'm saying? So basically there's an abundance of shit in here in this fucking universe, or even beyond it, really. And I'm more so pushing towards like the processes of how we can go beyond just what we've already seen and what we do see. This is how you basically reach the greater beyond and shit. This is how you basically reach those different dimensions and levels, or whatever you want to say it is, whatever you want to imagine it is. Honestly, it doesn't really matter. It's simply words. But at the end of the day, the point is that for you to really get there, it's not a difficult process. The process is really a process of letting go, a process of releasing in a way, and a process of also understanding that not everything is going to come to you in a certain idealized structure. Basically, this is how come, certain shit had already warned everything about, being too focused on idols and worship and shit like that. Like, not to try to get too much into religion right now, but this is basically how come there basically is religions. Like, you would never understand everything, so that's how come we always have this otherworldly concept of shit. You have to have an otherworldly concept and think about that. Also, it has to be in our DNA. It has to be something that we've also conceptualized into our own process of feeling and being. This is how come they even say we're Homo sapiens and shit. Sapien basically breaking down to what a sage might be. You know what I'm saying? What's wisdom and what's wise and how to discern shit, right? That's basically how come we feel like we are one of a kind and one of the same kind. It's basically how come we have these kind of like different fluctuations and influences and shit, is because everybody has a different mind, everybody's a different spirit, everybody's different, everybody has different ways of getting to this otherworldly plane where basically we've reached basically a certain kind of nirvana. We reach a state of being God or whatever, and reach shit like the great spirit and shit like that. Like, this is how you reach places that's beyond the physical dimension. Like, you know what I'm saying? That's basically how you have to realize certain things and unrealize a lot of shit. Like, basically unclog everything, because not everything is going to help you get to that point. That's the whole point of you getting there yourself, is that at the end of the day, you weren't relying on anything besides you to get there. Like, it isn't anything that can get you there besides you. It's like, I can bring a water, not bring a water, bring a horse to the water, but you know what I'm saying? Won't be able to make them drink. That's basically the whole process. Like, even if you see the information, can you digest it? You know what I'm saying? But that's what I got for you niggas for today. That's Christ and Fauna out. Peace.